What is a class? A class is a template for making objects. Let's take a look. For instance, we have a class that is stored on the Zim namespace, zim.rectangle, like so. So that's a rectangle class stored as a property on Zim. Let's see, there's also a date class, for instance, in JavaScript that is just loose in JavaScript. There is a date class. Anytime we want to make an object from a class, we use the new keyword, new Zim rectangle. Okay, that makes a new rectangle. And in here, we can pass in parameters like 100, comma 100, it'll be a square, and then a color, yellow, like so. So that is a new yellow rectangle object that we made from the rectangle class. Now, a rectangle is just a function. You can see how that looks like a function where we're passing in parameters, but it's a special function that also stores and creates properties and methods, things that you can do to it, and properties are things that it has. And there's a way to do that in the background, and that's all object-oriented coding. We'll take a look at that perhaps in either the mid-level what is or the advanced level what is on how to make your own classes. But this what is just a bit about a class and how we can use it. Okay, so there's how we use it. We use the new keyword to make a new object from the class. And we might store this in a variable var r is equal to that rectangle. Now, great, we've got a rectangle in R. We can't see it in Zim until we add it to the stage. So we could go stage.add child, and in the round brackets, R. That will add the rectangle to the stage, and we have a stage.update so that we can see that update. We can position the rectangle, so here's one of the rectangle's properties, r.x. So we access the x property using the dot syntax. Let's change that to rect, just a little bit longer. Rect, oops, rect, I wrecked that, rect.x. So our rectangle.x, let's change that to be, say, 300. And here's another property, rect.y is equal to 300 as well. Okay, so now we're going to position our new object at x and y of 300, and let's see what that looks like. There it is, a rectangle at 300 down and 300 across, and there is our rectangle. Now there are also, those are properties, there are also methods. If we didn't do any of this, comment that out. We could just add it to the stage and center it on the stage by using a method of the rectangle. And that would be rect.center. This is the center method, comes with Zim. And it's going to center that rectangle on whatever we put in here, the stage. So that's called a method. And we'll take a what is a method as well in a bit. Okay, so rect centering on the stage. We save that up. And I refresh here, and there it is being centered on the stage. So that's great. Now, along with classes, let's take a look out at the documentation. So we're going to go to Zim and look under Docs. Now we'll full screen this, F11, and make this a bit bigger for you. There you go. And we're going to go down and we're going to take a look at some classes. So these are a bunch of methods in the create module, but in the Zim build module, there's a bunch of classes. Here's a container class, and you can recognize a class because it starts with a capital letter. This starts with a capital letter, but it's all capitals, so that makes it a thing called a constant. So a class, though, is a capital letter to start here. And if it's two words, our class usually is a capital letter and then another capital letter. there's the rectangle that we had just seen. And we can see that there's a bunch of parameters that we can pass in. All right, now in some cases, for instance, this button class, a button class is exciting because you get to make buttons. There's a width and a height and the label for the buttons. A color, a roll color, a border, oh my goodness, and it just keeps going. A border thickness, a corner, a shadow. So say you wanted to make a square button. That would be going over a long way of all these parameters. You might not care about a roll color, a border color, or thickness. You just want to set the corner. Okay, so let's see how we can do that. First of all, in this documentation, you can open this up and you can read about all those parameters. You can see examples, and there's all the parameters. You can read what they do. All right, and this is describing the class. You see, a button is a Zim class, and it extends a Zim container, which is another class. And we'll talk about extends in an advanced what is, or possibly a mid what is. Okay, so let's go back and test out some stuff. Close that. In our rectangle, we have, but let's do a button. So we'll, let's just change this into a button. We'll call it var but is equal to a new Zim button. Okay, now it did have a height. Actually, this would all work. This would be this would be too small to fit the word yellow on there, but this would be a little square button with the word yellow on it. Do you want to see it? But we better take that but and center it on the stage as well. It's going to look ugly. Are you sure you want to see it? I don't really want to see it. Oh, it just fit. Not only that, but the button's orange, so it's a little bit confusing. So there is a 100 by 100 button that says the word yellow on it. Let's open that up a little bit, 200, and make it a bit thinner, you know, a button shape. How about 60? Like so. And since it happens to be orange, we'll say the word orange on it so it's not so jarring. And we refresh that. There's an orange button. But say I didn't want those curves on there. What you would normally have to do with parameters as you pass them into a class is you would look at the documentation. I can't remember how many there are, but for all of the things that we don't care about, like that button is fine. We just want corners of 0. That means they'd be square corners. For all of these other parameters, like the roll color, we would have to put in the word null, comma. And then there was something like the border color, and we would put that in as null. And then I think there was the border roll color, or whatever it was, and we would put that in as null. And we would keep on going and passing in null for each of those parameters. Okay. Finally, we would get to, imagine if we're here, we would put 0 for the corner, but we're not even here yet. We've got a couple more that we would have to put in. Now I'd have to go look at the documentation, and I would have to count out how many nulls we would put in there, and that's annoying. Now what gives Zim power is all of its parameters, almost every set of parameters like this, anytime that there's a lot of them, or even just a few, we give you 2 ways to access the parameters. So this is the traditional way that is usually done, where you would have to put in placeholder nulls to get to a distant parameter. But there's also the Zim Duo method, which was introduced in Zim 2, Zim Duo, and that is where we can pass in a single configuration object to our class. So let's see what that would look like. What that looks like is here's our object, and then we have to say what these things are. So the width of 200, a height of 60, a color of orange, and then that's it. Right now we don't need all these nulls. We can just go comma corner colon 0, and we end our object there. Okay, so this whole thing is one parameter. You see how that's now just one parameter that is an object, and we call that a configuration object. We're configuring this button. And all we do is take the parameter names followed by a colon and the value. So in the other way, in the traditional way for parameters, we don't have to put in the name, we just put in the values. So that can be handy if we just quickly wanted to make a 200 by 60 orange button and we didn't care about the corner. It would have been faster to just put in 260 in orange. But we have the option, now that we do care about a corner, we have the option to go to the ZimDuo technique of a configuration object. And now we can pass in the corner of 0 as one of its properties, and the order doesn't matter. We could have even put the corner, if we wanted to, way at the front of the object. And a semicolon there. Oh, sorry, comma there. Okay, so corner 0 now is at the beginning, the width of 200, height of 600, color of orange, and we wouldn't have that there. I usually keep them in the same order that they are in the documentation, just you have to, but there you are. Okay, so now I save that, and we're passing in one parameter, and let's see what happens to our button. We should see the corner go to 0. And indeed it does. So now the corner has a 0 radius, or it's a square button. And that's called the ZimDuo technique, a way of passing in parameters either individually or as a configuration object to our class. And as you can imagine, we have many of those classes. There's at least a couple dozen classes, and many of those have many parameters. So that becomes handy. Matter of fact, it makes it even what you call manageable. So that's a bit about a class and how we can pass in parameters to the class to make the object. The object will also have a bunch of properties and methods, and we'll do a what is a property and what is a method very, very soon. Excellent. I'm inventor Dan Zen. We're here at zimjs.com where we have some excellent classes to use. Ciao.